Hey folks, I'm excited to share some stories with you today that I've written myself. Whether you're a long-time follower or just joining us, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these tales. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe if you're new here. Let's dive in, and I hope you enjoy. I ordered a girl of the dark web to act as my dead wife for the past 3 years. I can't stop myself. I don't know if I should be writing this. Maybe I need to get it off my chest, but even thinking about it makes my skin crawl. This all started 3 years ago, and if you asked me back then if I'd be in this mess, I'd call you crazy. My name is Mike, and my wife Jenny died 4 years ago in a car accident. She was my everything, and when she died, I felt like a part of me died too. I couldn't cope. Grief counseling, therapy, meds, nothing worked. My friends and family tried to help, but eventually they drifted away. I was alone in our big house, filled with memories of her. That's when I found the dark web. I was looking for anything to numb the pain, any distraction. One night, after too many drinks, I stumbled upon a forum discussing all kinds of illegal and taboo stuff. One post caught my eye. Order a companion to your liking. I wish I could say I hesitated, but I didn't. Desperation makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. I clicked the link, and it led me to a site where you could order people. It was horrifying, but in my drunken state, it felt like a solution. I could have Jenny back, even if it was just a charade. I filled out a form describing Jenny in detail. Her blonde hair, blue eyes, the way she smiled, her laugh. I included everything. A few days later, I received an email. Your order has been processed. She will arrive soon. I sobered up quickly after that. Panic set in. What had I done? But part of me was also excited. Maybe this would help. When the doorbell rang a week later, my heart nearly stopped. I opened the door, and there she was. She looked just like Jenny. It was eerie, like seeing a ghost. She introduced herself as Lily, but I insisted on calling her Jenny. She didn't argue. She was perfect, too perfect. She knew things about Jenny that I hadn't told anyone. Her mannerisms, her voice, everything was spot on. It was like having my wife back. At first, it felt good. We fell into our old routines. But then, the nightmares started. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, feeling like someone was watching me. Sometimes, I'd catch her staring at me, her eyes empty and cold. Other times, I'd wake up to her standing over me, just staring. She never explained why. Things got worse when I found her in the basement one night, whispering to herself. She was holding one of Jenny's old dresses, mumbling something I couldn't understand. When I asked her what she was doing, she just smiled and said, "I'm remembering." I started noticing little things that didn't add up. She'd disappear for hours, sometimes days. When I asked her where she'd been, she'd give vague answers or just smile. I found a hidden stash of strange items in her room. Old photos, locks of hair, and other creepy stuff. It was like she was collecting pieces of Jenny. I tried to end it. I told her to leave, that I didn't need her anymore, but she refused. She said I had ordered her, and she couldn't leave until I was satisfied. No matter what I did, she stayed. One night, I woke up to find her standing at the foot of the bed, holding a knife. She was smiling, but her eyes were empty. "I need to make you remember," she said. I managed to talk her down, but the fear hasn't left me since. I started digging into her past, trying to find out who she really was. What I found was disturbing. She had no history, no records, nothing. It was like she didn't exist before she came to me. I contacted the site I ordered her from, but it was gone. No trace of it anywhere. I'm trapped in this nightmare, and I don't know how to get out. She's always there, watching me, smiling that empty smile. I can't sleep, can't eat. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I ordered a girl off the dark web to act as my dead wife, and now I can't stop myself. I've made a terrible mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. If anyone out there is thinking of doing something similar, don't. It's not worth it. Nothing is worth this. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I need help, but I don't know who to turn to. I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. It's been a few months since my last post, and things have only gotten worse. I'm writing this now because I need to get it all out to make sense of it. Maybe someone out there can help me. Or maybe I'm just hoping that writing this will make me feel less alone. Either way, I need to continue my story. After that night with the knife, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the same bed as her. I started sleeping on the couch, but I could still feel her presence, always watching, always smiling. It was like living with a ghost, but worse. A ghost doesn't try to harm you. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was coming from the basement again. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept down the stairs. There she was, sitting in the dark, whispering to herself. Only this time, she wasn't alone. There were photos of Jenny all around her, each one defaced eyes scratched out, faces mutilated. She was holding a doll that looked disturbingly like Jenny, talking to it as if it were alive. I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her, yelling at her to leave, but she just looked at me with those empty eyes and said, "You don't really want me to go. You need me." Her voice was calm, too calm. It sent chills down my spine. I tried locking her out of the house, but she always found a way back in. I'd wake up to find her standing over me or sitting in the corner of the room, just watching. I started to fear for my life. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. The police wouldn't believe me, and even if they did, what could they do? Arrest her? For what? Being creepy? Desperation drove me back to the dark web, searching for any trace of the site where I had ordered her. I found nothing. It was like it had never existed. I even hired a private investigator, but he came up empty-handed. Lily, or whatever her real name was, had no past, no records, nothing. I decided to follow her one day, hoping to find out more about her. She left the house in the middle of the night, and I trailed her to an old abandoned building on the outskirts of town. She went inside, and I waited for what felt like hours. When she finally came out, she wasn't alone. She was with a group of people, all dressed in black, their faces hidden by hoods. They were chanting something that made my blood run cold. I confronted her when she came home. I demanded to know what she was doing, who those people were. She just smiled that empty smile and said, "They're helping me remember, helping us remember." Her words made no sense, but the way she said them, so calm and sure, terrified me. That's when I noticed something else. Her appearance was changing. Little by little, she was becoming more like Jenny. Not just in looks, but in mannerisms, in the way she spoke, the things she said. It was like she was becoming Jenny. Or maybe she always was, and I just hadn't realized it. I started finding more strange items around the house. Pieces of clothing, personal items that belonged to Jenny, things I had thought were lost. It was as if she was trying to replace Jenny in every possible way. And the more she did, the more I felt myself slipping away, losing my grip on reality. I don't know how much longer I can take this. Every day is a nightmare. Every night filled with terror. I'm afraid to sleep, afraid to wake up. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I need help, but I don't know who to turn to. If anyone out there has any advice, any way to help, please. I'm begging you. I can't do this alone. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and I can hardly believe what's happened since then. Writing this is the only thing keeping me sane, or at least giving me the illusion of sanity. Everything around me is falling apart, and I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of madness. After I followed Lily to that abandoned building, things escalated quickly. I began to notice changes in her behavior that were even more disturbing. She became more possessive, more controlling. She wouldn't let me out of her sight for long. Whenever I tried to leave the house, she would be waiting for me when I got back, her eyes full of that eerie, empty calmness. One night, I woke up to find her in the kitchen cooking. At first, it seemed normal, but then I saw what she was cooking. She had found Jenny's old recipes, the ones she used to make for special occasions, and was recreating them. The smell, the taste, everything was exactly the same. It was as if Jenny was there, but it wasn't her. It was Lily, and she was enjoying it, reveling in it. I tried to confront her again, but every time I did, she would just smile and say, "I'm doing this for us. You need to remember." Her words made my skin crawl, and I couldn't understand why she kept saying that. What was she trying to make me remember? I started to lose time. Hours, sometimes days, would go by, and I would have no memory of what happened. I'd find myself in different parts of the house, doing things I didn't remember starting. One night, I woke up in the basement, surrounded by candles and old photos of Jenny. Lily was there, chanting something in a language I didn't understand. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "You're almost ready." Ready for what? I had no idea, and the more I tried to figure it out, the more my mind seemed to slip away. I stopped going to work, stopped seeing friends and family. They tried to reach out, but I pushed them away, afraid of what Lily might do if they got too close. Then one night, I found a journal in her room. It was filled with notes, drawings, and plans, pages and pages of details about Jenny, about me, about our life together. It was like she had been studying us, preparing for this. There were notes about rituals, about summoning spirits, about taking on someone else's life. The more I read, the more horrified I became. One entry stood out. It was dated a few days before Jenny's accident. It described, in chilling detail, the events that would lead to her death, the exact time, place, and manner of the crash. It was like Lily knew it was going to happen, or worse, had somehow caused it. I confronted her with the journal, demanding answers. She just looked at me with those empty eyes and said, "It was necessary. You needed to be free. We needed to be together." Her words made no sense, but the way she said them, with such conviction, terrified me. I tried to leave, to get away from her, but she always found me. No matter where I went, she was there, waiting. I felt trapped, like a prisoner in my own home, in my own mind. I started to believe that maybe I was going insane, that none of this was real. But then, something happened that shattered any illusion I had left. I woke up one night to find myself standing over Lily, a knife in my hand. She was smiling, her eyes closed, as if she was waiting for me to do it. I dropped the knife and backed away, horrified by what I had almost done. She opened her eyes and said, "It's time. You need to remember." And then she handed me a photo, one I had never seen before. It was of Jenny and me, but there was someone else in the background, someone who looked exactly like Lily. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She had been there all along, watching, waiting, planning. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm afraid for my life, afraid of what she might do, but also afraid of what I might do. I need help, but I don't know who to turn to. If anyone out there is reading this, please, I need advice. I need to get out of this nightmare, but I don't know how. I'm back, and things have reached a level of horror I never imagined possible. I've been trying to piece together everything, but it feels like every answer leads to more questions. The more I uncover, the deeper the nightmare becomes. Writing this is my only way to keep track of what's happening, and maybe, just maybe, find a way out. After finding that photo, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Lily had been a part of our lives long before Jenny died. But why? How? I needed to find out. I started digging through old records, searching for any clue that might explain who Lily really was and what she wanted. That's when I found the connection, an old newspaper article from over 20 years ago. It was about a woman named Elizabeth Rowe who had been institutionalized after her family died in a fire. The article mentioned that she had a daughter, Lily. The resemblance was uncanny. It had to be her. I tracked down the institution where Elizabeth had been held, hoping to find more information. When I got there, I was told she had died years ago, but they allowed me to look at her records. The details were chilling. Elizabeth had been obsessed with the occult, convinced she could bring back the dead. Her daughter Lily had been taken away and placed in foster care after the fire, but there was nothing about what happened to Lily after that. I returned home with this new information, more confused and scared than ever. When I confronted Lily with what I had found, she didn't deny it. She simply smiled and said, "Now you understand. We're meant to be together." Her words sent chills down my spine. I asked her what she meant, how she could possibly think any of this was right. She just looked at me with those cold, empty eyes and said, "I've been waiting for you, Mike. I've been waiting for you to remember." That night, I had the most vivid dream. I was back at the scene of Jenny's accident, but this time I saw everything clearly. Lily was there, standing on the side of the road, watching as Jenny's car crashed. She wasn't just a bystander, she was the cause. I woke up drenched in sweat, the realization hitting me hard. Lily had orchestrated everything. She had killed Jenny. Desperation and fear consumed me. I needed to get out, but I didn't know how. I tried calling the police, but when they arrived, Lily was gone. They found nothing unusual and left, leaving me alone in the house with my tormentor. She returned later that night, as if nothing had happened, smiling that eerie smile. The following days were a blur of terror and confusion. I started seeing things, hearing whispers in the dark. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Lily seemed to be everywhere, always watching, always waiting. I began to question my own sanity, wondering if I was losing my mind. One night, I found her in the basement again, surrounded by candles and photos of Jenny. This time, she was performing some sort of ritual. I watched in horror as she cut herself, chanting in that strange language. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "It's almost time. You need to remember." Her words echoed in my mind as I ran back upstairs, locking myself in my room. I needed to escape, but I didn't know how. The house felt like a prison, and Lily was its warden. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I had to find a way out, but I was too terrified to act. Then I found a letter hidden in Jenny's old belongings. It was addressed to me, written shortly before she died. In it, Jenny mentioned a woman who had been following her, someone she felt was a threat. She urged me to be careful, to trust my instincts. It was as if she knew something terrible was going to happen. The letter was the final piece of the puzzle. Jenny had known about Lily, had felt the danger, and now it was up to me to put an end to this nightmare. I gathered my courage and confronted Lily one last time. I told her I knew everything, that I wasn't afraid of her anymore. She just laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about fear. This is about destiny. We were meant to be together, Mike. You and I, forever. Her words filled me with a cold dread. I realized then that there was no reasoning with her, no escaping her. She was obsessed, driven by a madness I couldn't comprehend. I knew what I had to do. I had to end this, once and for all. As I write this, I'm preparing to leave the house for good. I don't know where I'll go, but anywhere is better than here. If you're reading this, please, learn from my mistakes. Don't let desperation drive you to do something you'll regret. And if you ever encounter someone like Lily, run. Don't look back. Just run. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and I'm finally somewhere safe. I'm writing this from a hotel room, far away from that house, from Lily, and from everything that happened. But even here, miles away, the memories haunt me. I need to finish this story, to document the end, so maybe I can start to move on. The night I decided to leave, I knew I had to act fast. Lily's behavior was becoming more erratic, more dangerous. I packed a small bag with essentials and waited until she was asleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside made my heart race. I was terrified she would wake up and stop me, but somehow I managed to slip out without her noticing. I drove for hours, not caring where I ended up, as long as it was far away from that place. I found a cheap motel and checked in, locking the door behind me and pushing a chair against it for good measure. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the bed and fell into a restless sleep. The nightmares were relentless. I dreamed of Jenny, of the crash, of Lily's empty eyes and eerie smile. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, but I was safe. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I needed to find a way to end this for good. I spent the next few days researching everything I could about Lily, about Elizabeth Rowe, and about the rituals she had been performing. The more I learned, the more I realized how deep her madness went. She believed she could resurrect Jenny's spirit, that by becoming her, she could bind us together forever. I contacted a few experts in the occult, hoping to find someone who could help. Most of them dismissed my story as the ravings of a madman, but one person, an old woman named Agnes, agreed to meet me. She lived in a remote cabin, far from any signs of civilization. Desperation drove me to seek her out. Agnes listened to my story without interruption, her expression grave. When I finished, she nodded slowly and said, "There are dark forces at play here, forces that cannot be easily undone. But there is a way to break the connection, to free yourself from her grasp." She explained that Lily had used ancient rituals to bind herself to me, drawing on the power of the occult to manipulate reality. To break the connection, I would need to perform a counter ritual, one that would sever the ties she had created. It was dangerous, she warned, and there was no guarantee it would work. But it was my only chance. Armed with the knowledge Agnes had given me, I returned to the house. It felt like walking into the lion's den, but I knew I had no choice. I needed to end this once and for all. The house was eerily silent as I prepared for the ritual, gathering the items Agnes had instructed me to use: salt, candles, and a piece of Jenny's clothing. As I began the ritual, chanting the words Agnes had taught me, I could feel a change in the air. The temperature dropped, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Lily appeared, her eyes filled with fury. "You can't do this! We're meant to be together." Ignoring her, I continued the ritual, focusing all my energy on the task at hand. Lily screamed, a blood-curdling sound that echoed through the house. She lunged at me, but an invisible force held her back. I felt a surge of power, like a wave crashing over me, and then she was gone. The house fell silent once more. Exhausted, I collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down my face. It was over. Lily was gone, and the connection was broken. I gathered my things and left the house, vowing never to return. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Jenny was truly gone now, but so was the nightmare that had haunted me for so long. I've been staying in different places, trying to rebuild my life. It's not easy, and I still have nightmares, but I'm free. Writing this has helped, and I hope it serves as a warning to anyone who might be tempted to do what I did. Desperation can drive us to do terrible things, but there's always a way out, a way to find hope again. Thank you for reading my story. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. If you're ever in a situation that seems hopeless, remember that there is always a way out. You just have to find the strength to take the first step. If you step on Channel 13 on the dark web, don't open it. I always knew I was a bit too curious for my own good. It started as a typical night, scrolling through Reddit threads about creepy experiences and urban legends. One comment caught my eye. It mentioned a specific channel on the dark web, Channel 13. The user warned everyone to stay away from it, saying it was the most disturbing thing they had ever encountered. That piqued my interest. I mean, I had seen some pretty messed up stuff online before. How bad could it really be? I had some experience navigating the dark web, so I wasn't too worried about finding it. I fired up my Tor browser and started searching. It didn't take long. Channel 13 was a hidden service, accessible only through a specific link. I hesitated for a moment, a knot forming in my stomach, but my curiosity won out. I clicked the link. The screen went black, then a grainy video feed flickered to life. It looked like an old, abandoned room. The walls were covered in what looked like mold and graffiti. In the middle of the room was an old wooden chair, and on the chair was a person, blindfolded and gagged. The quality of the video was terrible, but I could see enough to know that the person was terrified. They were shaking, their muffled sobs barely audible over the static. My heart started pounding. This was definitely not what I expected. I wanted to close the browser, but something kept me watching. A figure stepped into view, their face obscured by a mask. They moved with a calmness that sent chills down my spine. The masked person walked up to the blindfolded figure and ran a gloved hand down their cheek. The person in the chair flinched and whimpered. I could barely breathe. I should have stopped watching, but I was frozen in place. The masked figure pulled out a knife, its blade gleaming under the dim light. They slowly traced the knife along the captive's arm, drawing a thin line of blood. The person in the chair cried out, their body tensing in pain. This was too much. I moved my mouse to close the browser, but before I could, the screen went black again. White text appeared. Welcome to Channel 13. Enjoy the show. The video feed returned, but this time, it was a different room. There was a large, rusty table in the center, and on the table lay another person, strapped down and naked. Their eyes were wide with terror, darting around the room. The masked figure was there too, holding a pair of pliers. They walked over to the table and slowly, methodically, started pulling out the person's fingernails. I felt sick. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The person on the table screamed, their voice raw and desperate. The masked figure didn't say a word, just continued their gruesome task with an unsettling calmness. The camera zoomed in on the person's face, capturing every agonizing detail. I could see the blood, the tears, the pure, unfiltered horror. Suddenly, the feed cut out again, replaced by the same white text. Feeling entertained yet? There's more to come. I was shaking. My hands were clammy, my heart racing. This wasn't just some sick prank or horror movie. This was real. I had to stop watching, but I couldn't. I was trapped, unable to look away from the nightmare unfolding on my screen. The next video was even worse. It showed a child, no older than 10, sitting in a dark, damp basement. They were crying, calling out for their parents. The masked figure appeared again, this time with a different mask, more grotesque and twisted. They walked up to the child, who recoiled in fear. The figure knelt down and whispered something in the child's ear, making them scream in terror. I couldn't do this. I couldn't watch a child be tortured. I forced myself to close the browser, but it wouldn't budge. The feed continued, showing the masked figure tormenting the child, playing with their fear like a cat with a mouse. I felt helpless, disgusted with myself for even opening that damn link. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the masked figure turned to the camera and spoke for the first time. Their voice was distorted, but I could make out the words. We know you're watching, and now we're watching you. My blood ran cold. The screen went black again, and I saw my reflection, pale and horrified. But then, something else caught my eye. In the corner of the screen, a small red light was blinking. It took me a moment to realize it was my webcam. They were watching me. They had been watching me the whole time. Panic set in. I yanked the cord from my computer, shutting everything down. I sat there in the darkness, my mind racing. What had I done? What had I gotten myself into? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone, that someone was watching me from the shadows. Sleep was out of the question that night. Every creak, every rustle made me jump. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I kept seeing the masked figure in my mind, their calm, sadistic demeanor haunting me. I knew I had to do something, but what? Go to the police? What could they do about a dark web channel? As the sun started to rise, I made a decision. I had to find out who was behind Channel 13. I had to stop them, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The dark web is a twisted, dangerous place, and I had just scratched the surface of its horrors. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to see this through, no matter the cost. I spent the next few days in a state of constant paranoia. Every time I left my apartment, I felt eyes on me. Every time I tried to sleep, I heard whispers. I knew it was irrational, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the people behind Channel 13 were watching me, waiting for their chance to strike. Despite my fear, I was determined to find out more. I started by researching everything I could about the dark web, focusing on hidden services and underground networks. I joined forums and chat rooms, talking to people who claimed to have experience with the darker corners of the internet. Most of them dismissed my story as a hoax or a figment of my imagination, but a few seemed genuinely concerned. One user, who went by the handle Dark Knight, reached out to me privately. They said they had encountered Channel 13 before and knew how dangerous it could be. Dark Knight told me that the channel was run by a group of sadistic individuals who got off on other people's suffering. They filmed their victims and streamed the footage for a select audience of paying members. It was a twisted form of entertainment for the truly depraved. Dark Knight warned me to stay away from Channel 13, to forget I had ever seen it, but I couldn't do that. I needed to know more. I asked them if they knew how to find the people behind the channel, but they were hesitant to share any information. They said it was too dangerous, that the people running Channel 13 had eyes and ears everywhere. Frustrated, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I dove deeper into the dark web, searching for any clues that could lead me to the source. It was slow going, and every new lead seemed to be a dead end, but I couldn't give up. I had to find out who was behind this, to stop them from hurting anyone else. One night, as I was sifting through yet another dark web forum, I received a private message from a user named Watcher. The message was brief. "I know what you're looking for. Meet me at the following address tomorrow night. Come alone." My heart pounded in my chest. This could be the break I needed, or it could be a trap. I had no way of knowing, but I couldn't ignore it. I had to take the risk. The next night, I found myself standing outside an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the town. The place looked like it hadn't seen any activity in years. I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached the entrance, my senses on high alert. Inside, the warehouse was dark and musty. I could barely see a few feet in front of me. I heard a faint rustling sound and turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. "You're the one looking for Channel 13, he said, his voice low and gravelly. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yes. Do you know who's behind it?" The man stepped closer, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "I can help you, but it won't be easy. These people are dangerous, and they won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way." I swallowed hard. "I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." The man studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right. There's a place you need to go, a building downtown. It's disguised as an old office, but inside, you'll find what you're looking for. Be careful. If they catch you, you won't make it out alive." He handed me a slip of paper with an address scribbled on it, then disappeared back into the shadows. I stood there for a moment, trying to steady my nerves. This was it, my chance to uncover the truth. But the danger was real, and I had to be prepared for anything. The next day, I made my way to the address on the paper. It was an old, nondescript building, blending in with the surrounding structures. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The place was eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. I made my way through the empty halls, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I found a door at the end of a long corridor, slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I stepped into a dimly lit room. My heart raced as I took in the scene before me. The room was filled with computer equipment, monitors lining the walls, each displaying a different video feed. My stomach churned as I recognized the scenes, different rooms, different victims, all being tortured in various ways. This was it, the nerve center of Channel 13. I moved closer, my eyes scanning the screens. I had to find some evidence, something I could take to the authorities. As I reached for one of the keyboards, I heard a noise behind me. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. A group of men stood in the doorway, their faces hidden by masks. They didn't say a word, just advanced toward me with a menacing intent. I knew I was in over my head. There was no way I could fight them all off. In a desperate move, I grabbed a nearby metal pipe and swung it at the nearest man. He grunted in pain, but it wasn't enough to stop him. The others closed in, and I felt a sharp pain in my side as one of them struck me. Everything went black. When I came to, I was strapped to a chair in a dark, dank room. My head throbbed, and I could taste blood in my mouth. The masked men stood around me, their expressions hidden, but their intent clear. One of them stepped forward, a familiar mask covering his face. It was the same figure from the videos, the one who had tortured those poor victims. He leaned in close, his voice a menacing whisper. "You should have listened," he said. "Now you're part of the show." Panic surged through me as I realized what he meant. They were going to torture me, just like the others. I struggled against the restraints, but it was no use. I was trapped. The masked figure raised a gloved hand, and the others moved to set up a camera. I could hear the faint hum of the equipment as they prepared to broadcast my suffering to their twisted audience. I felt a cold dread settle over me. There was no escape, no way out. As the camera started recording, the figure leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Welcome to Channel 13. Enjoy the show." When the camera started rolling, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The masked figure began to speak, his voice distorted and hollow. He introduced me to the viewers as the newest member of the show, his words dripping with mockery. I could see the red recording light blinking, capturing every moment of my terror. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but there was no escape. I was completely at their mercy. The figure walked over to a table covered with various tools and instruments, each one designed to inflict pain. He picked up a pair of pliers and turned back to me, his eyes glinting with sadistic glee. My heart pounded in my chest as he approached. He grabbed my hand, and I felt the cold metal of the pliers clamp down on my fingernail. The pain was excruciating as he slowly began to pull. I screamed, my voice echoing in the small room, but there was no one to hear me, no one to help. The torture continued for what felt like hours. Each new method was more brutal than the last. They burned me, cut me, broke my bones. The pain was unbearable, and I begged for mercy, but they only laughed. My screams seemed to fuel their cruelty. At some point, I lost consciousness from the pain. When I woke up, I was still strapped to the chair, my body a mass of agony. The camera was still recording, capturing every moment of my suffering. I felt a sense of hopelessness wash over me. I was going to die here, in this dark, miserable place, and there was nothing I could do about it. But then, something changed. The masked figure stopped, his attention diverted by something on one of the monitors. I couldn't see what he was looking at, but I heard him mutter something under his breath. The other men in the room seemed agitated, glancing at each other with concern. Before I could understand what was happening, the door burst open, and a group of heavily armed men stormed in. They wore tactical gear and moved with precision, quickly subduing the masked men. I felt a surge of relief as they untied me from the chair, but the pain in my body was overwhelming. One of the men leaned down, his face kind and concerned. "You're safe now," he said. "We've been tracking these guys for months. You're going to be okay." I nodded weakly, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe it was over. The nightmare that had consumed my life for the past few days was finally coming to an end. They carried me out of the building, and I saw a swarm of police cars and ambulances outside. The authorities had finally caught up with Channel 13. They had raided the place just in time to save my life. As I was loaded into an ambulance, I couldn't help but think about the other victims, the ones who hadn't been as lucky as me, the people who had suffered and died at the hands of those monsters. I vowed to do whatever I could to help bring them to justice, to make sure they paid for what they had done. But for now, I was just grateful to be alive. I closed my eyes as the ambulance sped away, feeling the first glimmer of hope I had felt in days. The nightmare was over, but the scars it had left behind would take a long time to heal. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospitals, police interviews, and therapy sessions. The physical wounds slowly began to heal, but the psychological scars ran deep. I couldn't sleep without seeing their masked faces in my nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that dark room, feeling the pain and terror all over again. The authorities worked tirelessly to dismantle Channel 13. The raid had led to the capture of several key members, but the investigation was far from over. The network was extensive, spanning multiple countries, and it would take time to bring everyone involved to justice. I tried to move on with my life, but it was difficult. The trauma had left me with a constant sense of unease. I jumped at every noise, and the sight of a dark alley or a shadowy figure sent me into a panic. I knew I needed help, but opening up about what had happened was incredibly hard. One day, I received a call from Dark Knight. They had been following the news and wanted to check in on me. We talked for a while, and I found it surprisingly comforting to speak with someone who understood the dark web and the horrors it could hide. Dark Knight suggested that I join a support group for survivors of online abuse and exploitation. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of sharing my story with strangers was terrifying, but I realized that I couldn't keep everything bottled up inside. I needed to confront my fears and start the healing process. The support group was a diverse mix of people, each with their own harrowing story. Listening to them, I felt a sense of camaraderie and understanding that I hadn't experienced before. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and began to share my story. As I talked, the words flowed more easily than I expected. The group listened with empathy and support, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I had found a community of people who understood my pain and were there to help me through it. With the support of the group and ongoing therapy, I began to reclaim my life. I found small ways to regain a sense of normalcy, whether it was taking a walk in the park or meeting friends for coffee. Each step, no matter how small, was a victory. I also started working with law enforcement, providing any information I could to help track down the remaining members of Channel 13. It was my way of fighting back, of ensuring that no one else would have to go through what I did. One day, I received a call from the lead investigator on the case. They had made significant progress, thanks in part to the information I had provided. The network was being dismantled, and more arrests were being made. It felt like a small measure of justice for all the victims, but the journey was far from over. Healing from such a traumatic experience was a long and difficult process. There were still days when the memories would overwhelm me, when the fear and anxiety felt insurmountable, but I was learning to cope, to find strength in the support of others. As I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized how far I had come. I had faced unimaginable horrors and survived. And while the scars would always be a part of me, they didn't define me. I was more than a victim. I was a survivor. And with that realization, I knew I could continue to move forward, to rebuild my life piece by piece. I would never forget the darkness of Channel 13, but I had found my way back to the light. Months turned into years, and life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. The trauma of Channel 13 was still a part of me, but it no longer controlled my every waking moment. I had found a new purpose in helping others who had suffered from similar experiences, using my story to raise awareness about the dangers lurking in the shadows of the internet. Through my involvement with various organizations, I met countless individuals who had been affected by online abuse and exploitation. Their stories were heartbreaking, but they also highlighted the resilience and strength of the human spirit. Together, we worked to support each other and advocate for stronger protections and resources for victims. One evening, as I was preparing for a speaking engagement at a local university, I received an unexpected message. It was from Watcher, the mysterious figure who had led me to the Channel 13 headquarters. The message was brief. "We need to talk. It's urgent." A sense of unease settled over me. I hadn't heard from Watcher since that fateful night. I replied cautiously, arranging to meet in a public place. The next day, I found myself sitting in a crowded cafe, scanning the room for any sign of my mysterious contact. Watcher arrived, looking just as enigmatic as I remembered. They took a seat across from me and got straight to the point. "Channel 13 is not completely dismantled," they said, their voice low and urgent. "There are still factions operating in the shadows, continuing their sick games." A chill ran down my spine. I had hoped that the nightmare was over, that the people responsible for such horrors were behind bars, but it seemed the darkness still lingered. "What can we do?" I asked, my resolve hardening. "How can we stop them?" Watcher leaned in closer, their eyes intense. "There's a way to bring them down, but it's risky. We need someone on the inside, someone who can gather evidence and expose their operations." The thought of going undercover in such a dangerous environment was terrifying, but I knew it was necessary. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady. "I'll help bring them to justice." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Watcher and I developed a plan to infiltrate the remaining factions of Channel 13. I created a new online identity, one that would allow me to gain their trust and access their inner circles. It was a dangerous game, but I was determined to see it through. The first contact came sooner than expected. I received an invitation to a private forum, one that required a series of tests to prove my loyalty. Each test was more disturbing than the last, designed to weed out anyone who wasn't truly committed to their twisted cause. I played my part, hiding my revulsion and fear behind a mask of indifference. Slowly, I gained their trust, moving deeper into their ranks. I documented everything, collecting evidence that would be crucial in bringing them down. The deeper I went, the more I realized the true extent of their operations. They were more organized and widespread than I had imagined, with connections to powerful individuals who protected and funded their activities. It was a horrifying revelation, but it only strengthened my resolve. Finally, the day came when I had gathered enough evidence to expose them. I contacted Watcher, and together we coordinated a raid with law enforcement. The takedown was swift and decisive, and this time we ensured that every member was captured and held accountable for their actions. As I watched the news reports detailing the arrests and the dismantling of the network, I felt a sense of closure. The nightmare of Channel 13 was finally over, but more importantly, we had made the internet a little safer, shining a light on the darkness that had lurked unseen for too long. In the aftermath, I continued my work, dedicating myself to helping others and advocating for stronger protections against online abuse. The scars from my ordeal would always be a part of me, but I had found a way to turn my pain into purpose. And as I stood before an audience, sharing my story and raising awareness, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced the darkness and survived, and in doing so, I had helped to bring a little more light into the world.